Hey, welcome to Tell Me How You're Mighty, real talk about cheating. I'm Tracy Shorn, the blogger known as Chump Lady, where I implore people to leave cheaters and gain lives.
And I'm Sarah Gorrell, radio broadcaster by day, single mother of 4. And 13 years ago, my ex walked out on his family for his affair partner. And it didn't feel like it at the time, but my life is so much better without him.
And we're here to tell you that you are mighty. We survived infidelity, and you can too. And this is our podcast. Welcome. Hey, this week we are doing comparing yourself to the affair partner, and we got so many submissions. Sometimes we read what you write, and other times you guys leave us voicemails, which is wonderful. We always like to hear your voice. But this one really touched a nerve. We're going to actually make 2 episodes out of this because we got so much comparing yourself. It's an inevitable stage of the whole suck fest of being cheated on. So we usually start with our own stories. So Sarah, did you compare yourself to the wonderful Schmoopie?
Well, I couldn't compete really because she was significantly younger and she also didn't have 4 children. And what my ex-husband did say to me was that was one of the reasons that he had the affair, because I was unreasonable, because if we wanted to go out, we had to have babysitters. And he said, she doesn't need babysitters. Well, of course not, because she hasn't got 4 children. You have. But that seemed to escape him. So, of course, I went into competition. Everyone does, don't they? But not just into competition with her as his new partner. I became terrified because she was this young, carefree person who had never had children, that she would be somebody that would somehow lure the children away. Because I was the one doing the school runs and the trying to get them to eat healthily and going to the dentist trips. And I thought, along will come this individual who's going to do all the fun things, and I'll just be the person that does the drudge.
Of course, you're the wife appliance, right? It's never a fair fight. And most of the time, you don't even know you're in a competition, right? That's the whole horror of being cheated on, is that there's a long period of cake eating. You know, sometimes goes on for decades, reading my stories of double lives and multiple affairs, and you have no idea that you're competing with a phantom. You might feel something's off, or you might think this person's checked out or overly critical of you. And, you know, I've told the story many times. I was a newlywed, so I really had no idea there was somebody's, there was more than one else. There was a double life. I had no clue. But she's the one who outed it to me. She called me. And then once that happened, you know, I went down a rabbit hole. The relationship predated me, probably went back 20 years at least. So I was just flummoxed, like, why didn't you marry her? Why am I in this?
Exactly.
And she was older than me. I mean, I found pictures, and she had a receding hairline. That's not kind, right? You know, because, you know, you could be a perfectly good person and have a receding hairline. But I was just like, I don't get it. And now I know that there's nothing to get. It's just that this person is dim and they're available and they want to believe they're special. And it's a certain kind of fuck-up-inness to be a knowing affair partner. And in her case, I mean, she had been a knowing affair partner other times, but she didn't know, and then she found out. And then she still kept at it. So anyway, we don't want to go into I did spend some time with that. And even if you think like you're doing this competition, you're sizing it up and you're going, I'm younger, I'm prettier, it's stupid, because the cheater is still central. You're still fighting over a dog turd, as I say. But when you're in it, it's such a shock.
I think because you're grappling with your self-esteem that's just taken a massive hammering, because you thought you were in this stable relationship with someone who was completely on your side, and then you find out that they're not. And I do sometimes think when you go into competition with the affair partner, you are competing with a fantasy in the same way as the affair creating a fantasy, because you're looking at them on social media, and whose life is real on social media. And I looked up my ex's other woman, and she had described herself as a comedian and an artist. Not any real evidence of this, but I kind of thought at the time, oh, not only is she must be really funny, if she's a comedian, she's talented, she's creative. But since their long-term relationship, I haven't seen any evidence of either any comedy or any art, to be brutally frank. So that was clearly a little bit of a fantasy in itself. One of the reasons I thought we should talk about this was I went out to lunch with someone really lovely the other day, day, and she's beautiful and clever and funny and has gone through a divorce recently. I don't think there was an affair involved, but she was still saying, "Oh, I'm doing the internet stalking." And she was very concerned that the new partner would take over a little bit when it came to her child. And one of the people that was out said, "Oh, well, you could do zip wiring and all sorts with him." And I thought, "Oh no, this is, you're going to get involved in hazardous pursuits just to prove that you're a better person than the other one that's doing the football."
Oh, no.
We all do that. We compare ourselves to other people, but you do it more than ever, whether an affair breaks up a marriage or whether your marriage breaks down and somebody else comes into your children's lives. There's always a part of you that thinks, "Oh, have they upgraded? Have they got someone better than me? Has my child got someone who's going to be a better role model than me?" It is so difficult. Right, let's hear the first example of comparison related antics.
It's been 10 years since my D-Day and fuckwit abandoning me and my son. He was 9 back then. But I remember suffering a solid year of comparing myself to Schmoopie. It was maddening. What could she have that I didn't? She wasn't prettier. She was only 2 or 3 years younger than me. In fact, she embodied everything fuckwit always said he hated, from being a soccer mom to having a minivan. I mean, literally, he said he hated these things. But with time and perspective and getting to read some of their ridiculous messages that they wrote between them, I realized he needed someone, anyone, who didn't know who he really was. Someone that was still enamored by him having served in the Navy. I served too, so it didn't make me all excited to see a picture of him in uniform from 25 years ago. She was still cooing about how tall he is. He's 6'5". So she didn't know that he's super clumsy and is a bull in a china shop and will break everything she owns. In fact, that first year living together, he plopped onto the bed at her house and broke it. I only know because my son was there and heard the racket and screaming. The best way to get over these idiots is to realize that they pick patsies to worship them. They don't want chumps anymore because we are bad supply. We know them without their masks. So fuckwits keep looking for willing idiots who actually think, for now, that they walk on water.
I thought she made a very good point, which is that it's not really a competition. It's that they want somebody who's easy, who's better supply, that you know too much. Like, you know all their faults. You know how much they suck. And this person is fresh and sparkly and hasn't heard the stories and doesn't know that they drape their pants over chairs when they walk in. I mean, the fair partner is being their best self, or, some image of who they want to project. And yeah, no one can compete with that. But they really want somebody who's easy supply. Easy supply. I thought that was a good insight.
Well, this is it, isn't it, really? That this particular person probably had an affair because he wanted to find new, fresh eyes that hadn't seen him as a clumsy oaf. It's nothing to do with who they are. It's how they see him that is the attraction, because it's years of familiarity. There's that expression, familiarity breeds contempt, which it doesn't necessarily, but it does breed a realistic view of who you're in a relationship with. You can't disguise who you are after years of marriage or, having dealt with the day-to-day domestic tasks. You are no longer that fantasy person that exists in the very early stages of a relationship.
No, you can't be. And I think if you're capable of true intimacy, those kind of everyday showing up bonds you. But I think affair partners match the cheater's character. They're sort of shallow and transactional, and they need that kind of mutual admiration society that's not really based on a lot of depth. And I think in my case, and like I said, there was more than one affair partner, but the one that was in my face and that was more long term, I think in that case, who knows what the attraction was. I asked him, I'm like, why didn't you marry her? And this could be a lie. Who knows? He goes, she's a bipolar alcoholic. So when you're choosing wife appliances, you want the one that presents a bit better than the bipolar alcoholic. But if I were to do an armchair shrink thing, I think what it was that she would accept him no matter how much he sucked. Now, there was lots of drama. She'd get upset that he had other people, but she always took him back. She always continued it. And he even said that. He said, I can do anything and she'll always be there. She'll always take me back. And that should have been a clue to me, like immediately to run, because I'm like, this person is never going away. And he thinks that's a good thing. He's being disdainful of her, but also in this kind of like, this works for me. I got someone who will take any shit I dish out and they will lap it up. And that kind of humiliating themselves for me, that abject loyalty turns me on because I'm a freak. I'm a narcissist.
Hey, Tracy, if only you'd have had that level of loyalty, you could be still engaged in these dysfunctional antics after all these years.
Oh, he told me I was a quitter. That's my favorite line. I'm a quitter.
Right, I think the next one highlights the fact that sometimes there is no point in competing because they want something or someone completely different.
In terms of comparing ourselves to the affair partner, in my case, it was difficult to do that because it turns out it was a trans woman. I was married to Fuckwit for 25 years, and there were minor gaslighting D-days beforehand, but I didn't know. He claims he was bi. I find this out afterwards, of course, that he dated trans women before we met. And oh, how silly of me. He couldn't possibly bring them home to mom. So anyway, so the trans woman that he had the affair with and who is still with, of course, was 28 years younger and said, oh, how horrible. He wanted somebody his own age to cheat with. But the main thing was I realized that, I couldn't compare myself to this person, which was fine. I didn't want to. But I realized, because I've never actually been in a room with her and didn't want to, that she's probably taller and with larger hands, and which is true. And it seemed very weird to me because he always loved how small and petite I was and wanted to toss me around and things like that. Anyway, life is much better without this idiot.
Oh gosh, he doesn't know what he is. Yeah, I can't tell you that this is not the first time I've heard this at all. And again, they're presenting a false front to you, right? They're telling you, "Hey, I'm a straight guy. I love you, I'm monogamous and committed." And then you base your whole life on that. And you find out that no, they're into trans women or, whatever. They're exploring their sexuality and you're not looped in at all. And we're having a very delicate moment with our politics of all this hatred towards trans people. And I think when you have an affair partner who is other, sometimes people indulge in hate, and I don't want to do that. I just think that it shows that cheaters don't look at people as people. They look at them as a fetish, as a thing, as like, I like Asian chicks or I like trans women. You're just trading cards. You're orifices. I call it the pussy buffet.
To me, it's a form of hate, actually, to not openly date a trans woman and be proud to be with that person and to accept them as your partner. Not to say, well, you're fine to have an affair with, but I need somebody as a perceived acceptable front. That is a form of hatred to me in its own right.
Absolutely. And it's that kind of, you're good enough to be my dirty secret. You're transgressive. You're not just trans, you're transgressive. And I argue that cheaters are abusosexuals, to use a term that somebody used on the blog, which I think is perfect. It's that they want to debase everybody and they want to be the central character in it all. And in a way, I would feel like they're not seeing you for you. You're their dirty secret.
Well, the next one again, this is an element of you just can't compete with this. You cannot provide what is being provided here. Let's have a listen.
My fuckwit saw dozens of really high-end prostitutes that charged thousands of dollars a night. And boy, did I compare myself. They were 15 to 20 years younger than me. They were very attractive, and they had really easy to find marketing materials because that's how people found them to pay them money for sex. And I obsessed. It was torture. I tortured myself for like 15 months. I had this phase where I wanted to become a sex worker or a prostitute or something because I don't know, like it was just my way of trying to grapple with this. I grew up really Catholic, and the Catholic Church did not prepare me for like, what do you do when you find out the entire relationship your spouse was seeing sex workers? There's a phase where he told me this was better than having another kind of affair, but there's no pain Olympics, and it hurt. The comparison part hurts so badly. I really feel for everyone going through the early days, and that bargaining stage is so painful where you're comparing yourself and you're like, maybe there's some way. Maybe there's a magic way that I can be who this other person is, but you just can't.
This one really breaks my heart because, again, I got such an education being chump lady about sex work. And once I know that a man does that, I mean, look at with the Epstein files. I mean, just how disgusting and transactional they are. And I mean, they just use these young girls like used up Kleenexes and stuff. And I just think if you're buying human beings and rating them like Amazon purchases, you're a sick motherfucker and you don't belong in a relationship. So to have to compete with that, right? To have to compete with OnlyFans and sex workers and high-end escorts. And this poor woman thought, oh, I should become more like a sex worker. You cannot. You can't be 1,000 different orifices. You cannot compete. And it's mostly women. I don't know straight men that are competing with prostitutes. Maybe gay men. I don't know. Write me if that's a thing in your relationship. But I really think that it's a kind of misogyny. I don't know. All right. I had my sermon. What do you think, Sarah?
You can't compete with that, can you? Again, I agree. And my own experience of talking to sex workers was when I did a late night phone in and somebody called in and said that as a dominatrix, she earned an awful lot of money. And I was quite fascinated by her. So I invited her in to share her story and to talk about it. And yes, she did make lots of money. But when she got talking, it became very clear that she was very vulnerable. It wasn't what she dreamt of doing when she was at school. She had other aspirations and ideas about what she would achieve in life. But there was all sorts of twists and turns and vulnerability that led her to that particular profession.
Yeah. I mean, I think vulnerability is a really good term. And I say if you're comparing yourself to a sex worker, and I know that, people have had these very scammy, predatory kinds of experiences, but I'd also think this person, you don't know, they could be trafficked, they could be vulnerable, they could be underage. You don't know. I had an experience. It wasn't somebody who's, well, I guess at the top of their profession or earning lots of money, but I used to work at the DC Bar Association in Washington, DC. And it was, if you're in Washington, DC, it used to be located at 12th and L Street, which was the red light district of town. And I once got to work early, like, I don't know, 7 a.m. or something. I don't know, had some deadline. And I got out of my Uber. And it was February and it was freezing rain. And there was this young girl in the intersection and she just had a t-shirt on, Sarah. She just had no pants on and she was in freezing rain in a t-shirt. And I thought, this is a person having a mental health crisis, right? She's wandered from home. She's not wearing her pants. I mean, this is like a nightmare. And I was crossing the street. I was going to go to her and say, like, do you need me to call somebody? Are you okay? And she looked at me and she walked into a car. And it occurred to me, I'm like, oh shit, right. This is the red light district. I just usually get here after hours and that's shut down. And I was so horrified by that experience. I just thought the mother in me was like, don't get in that guy's car. I wanted to save her. And I can never think of sex work and not think of her. What are we doing to women that they're doing this? So guys who buy that, the guy in the car, their wives write to me, right? Have been writing to me for 14 years. And I'm just like, you cannot wash that stain off of someone. I just think if that's what you're competing with, if you're not safe with that person, that's really how I feel about it. I convinced me otherwise, but to this person who's competing, I'm so sorry that happened to you.
I think this next one actually sums it up really beautifully. Have a listen to this.
You can't help but compare yourself to the affair partner, but one thing that I've determined that she is not better than me, she's different than me. Our priorities are different. She never had children. I have children, so my priorities are different than hers. She's in better physical shape than I am, but that doesn't make her better than me in any way. I also find they don't leave you for someone who's better than you. They leave you for somebody who's easier than you. She doesn't demand that he's a better person. She doesn't demand that he take care of his children. She has no wants or demands from him. And maybe because she knew she was getting the other side of the stick where she was the other woman, she doesn't have any demands for him in that way either. So overall, it's a hard sandwich to swallow sometimes, but I find myself thinking not better, just different.
I bet you can relate to this one. Like, she doesn't have children. She's got this carefree life. You're different and that they just want different.
Well, I think this sums it up. She has no wants or demands from him. This is it. It's what we were saying earlier. It's not about it being a different person. It's being somebody who has different expectations. That rosy glow of the first start of a relationship, who isn't asking for the bins to be put out or the kids to be picked up from school or the washing to be done. Just someone that will bask in the glory of that early relationship where people are a fantasy and not a reality.
That's right. I would say the same thing is true about sex workers, right? They have no demands from them. I mean, I guess you could pay for the girlfriend experience, but they have no obligations. They don't have to take your mother to their chemo appointments or watch their children. They will pay money to have someone have no demands of them and do everything they tell them to do.
I think what sums this up, I remember just after I'd had my fourth child, and at that point I had four very young children. Two of them were under the age of 4. So you can imagine it wasn't easy. And I scraped my hair back into a ponytail, and I think I was just wearing jogging bottoms and someone actually said to me, "Oh, you want to watch yourself? You need to get yourself into some makeup and wear some decent clothes because you're going to lose him." So there is that perception that you're supposed to gad about when you're coping with the demands of day-to-day life. And of course, at that stage in life, I wasn't somebody that was the same person that I'd been when I was at the start of the relationship. You can put more time and effort into your appearance because you're not busy changing nappies, dealing with toddler tantrums, and trying to juggle work and everything that goes with it. But it's the whole philosophy, this perfect person. Nobody's that perfect, glamorous person all of their life.
Well, right. And again, you're centering this guy like it's your fault if he turns away. Not that he's a fickle fuck who's really shallow and doesn't appreciate the woman who gave birth to 4 of his children. We're not going to judge that guy. We're going to judge the woman whose hair is in a ponytail and probably has baby barf on her shoulder. That's the person you're judging. This person is running a marathon in adulting. Step back and reframe it. It's just so messed up. I mean, it's just like my cheater calling me a quitter. Oh, it's my job to work harder to try to keep the wonderfulness that is you. Really? That's my job? And when I look back, I'm so horrified. That landed. At some level, I thought, yes, I failed. I have to keep him. Like, how did his attention wander? It's so stupid, but it's baked in. It's everywhere, everywhere.
There's another one here that again highlights this. This is just throwing the most horrific insult at someone and trying to deflect blame. Let's have a listen to this one.
So before my fuckwit even went deep into his affair, he already tried to weasel his way out of the marriage by saying hurtful things to me. And one of the most hurtful things that he did say to me was that having sex with me was like throwing a hot dog into a hallway. I have, at that point, birthed 2 kids and had issues with prolapse and all kinds of stuff. So needless to say, it was very hurtful at that moment. And then a few months later, when I found out about his affair with a younger woman that has never had children, that I needed to really, really work through. And now I can tell you that I have found hot dogs that better match my hallway. I don't think the hallway ever was the problem.
I love that she's found other hot dogs. There's nothing wrong with her hallway. Talk about a way to really try to wound somebody. Again, I wish I could tell you that's the first time I've heard that. It is not the first time I've heard that. I just think it's sick. Shame on him.
I have to say, in this comparison exercise, it doesn't sound like we've got any people here that are worth fighting over or comparing yourself to the affair partner. The thing that you feel universally when you read these stories is gratitude that the person sharing their story doesn't have to put up with these antics anymore.
Yeah, right. And that it's not you, it's them. And I love that she found that out. I would like to think that you don't have to go sleep with other men to find out that you're not the person who has the problem, that you're perfectly attractive. And it's hard to self-soothe. It's good to get data, but it's terrible. And I come back to it's abuse. Every story we just heard today, and we've got more next week. It's abuse, right? Who would do this to you? Anybody who loves you would never, ever put you in a position where you are competing. That in and of itself, that whole setup is abusive. Reject it. Reach out to us. You can check us out at tellmehowyourmighty.com or check out the blog at chumplady.com. I'm always open to your suggestions there.